quickly. So maybe if you still have the energy, could we maybe speak a bit about free will then? 'Cause it seems like that's like I was curious about, you've distinguished free, like in one of your videos you speak to how you think free will, there's a kind of mistake that occurs when you talk about free will because it mushes two things together that should
Yes.
not be mushed together.
Yes.
So what can you like what do you mean by free? What do you mean by will? And like what is the mistake that's made and
Well,
how what's a better way to think about it?
I mean, you know, I, the irony is, even though I deal in metaphor and abstraction a lot because it's hard to discuss paradox and all this stuff without it,
Mm,
um, words do have definitions.
sure. Yes, they do.
They do, and I find it extra ironic because people work words to their own meanings as they want to utilize them a lot, and we can't help but do that on many instances, which is ironic me saying you can't help but do it with relating
Right.
to free will. But but that's such as the phenomenon or the phenomenology of language is that it's fluid, it's always changing, it's liquid,
Right.
it's it's a dynamic substrate. And um but but the point is they do have definitions. um
Yes.
so I mean, freedom, I mean, what is freedom, what is free, what is it? We can look up the literal definition, but we can just discuss it as well. And I mean, to me, freedom literally means, if in a basic way, is to lack constraint. Is that a fair enough definition? Like, to
I mean,
be
I would say, yeah, it's at least a good place to start, right? You
to
can
be
always say, well,
free
what is
from
constraint? Blah, blah,
something
blah, blah, blah. But yeah.
is to lack constraint. So now, within the very basis of the term freedom or free, is is the necessity to consider a constraint and constraints.
Hmm.
So from the get-go, we have a term that is always a relationship to its constraints or lack thereof, right? So we have
Yes.
so the spectrum of relative freedoms that a being, for example, may experience can be, theoretically infinite. It so but likewise, what did I say? I said the freedoms. I've confused myself now. But
It's no, no,
but
it's all good. It's all good.
so um, there's a direct relationship between the constraints and the freedoms, and the dynamic between them, and the spectrum is near infinite. That's what I'm trying to say. So so one might be theoretically infinitely constrained,
Hmm.
which, you know, regardless of people's lack of belief regarding my condition, is effectively describing my position.
Okay.
Because,
Yeah.
but at least on a metaphysical and existential level, I have zero. Absolute. And if there's an absolute zero, that's what relates
Hmm.
to my condition. But now you say the opposite. A being might have theoretically infinite freedom. And so who is the being that has infinite freedom, if we're going to consider any of them, right? We
Hmm.
could get into that discussion. Is there any? And what I say personally is like, well, if there's a singular, if the singular personal embodiment of the Lord of the universe, God, what have you, if there's any being with absolute freedom, it's that one. Um,
Right.
but but everything that exists within the meta system of the infinite and eternal creation is abiding by some kind of constraint of some form or another, because It
Right. I
exists.
mean, you can't exist. Yeah, I mean, even if the constraint is that you can't not exist, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
just the fact of existence is a constraint.
Right. Everything, every object, every being is constrained in some manner.
Right.
So right there, we already know that there's no such thing as um, absolute freedom for any distinct subjective entity within the meta system of all creation. It's a metaphysical impossibility.
Yeah.
It just does not it's not possible because it like breaks the whole system down. If you are a part of it, you are of it. You are not separate from it. You are not
Right.
distinct entirely.
Yeah.
Um, and I can get into a little bit of that. I say, okay, maybe theoretically there are only two, and it's myself and the other, but that's a whole, I don't want to. Um, okay, so now we've sort of fleshed out, freedom, right? And
Hmm.
so now, but plain and simple, I mean, I'll ask your opinion on it.
Sure.
Um, is this a world in which each distinct being living on this planet or in this universe is experiencing the same opportunity of freedom? Are they same? Are they?
Well, I don't know that. I mean, so one, either freedom is totally an illusion and doesn't exist, or the answer is obviously no, right?
Right. I mean, well, we could go right back to. I mean, it's again. I mean, the word freedom necessitates the word constraint. It necessitates binding because one
Like,
can't be free from something unless there's a relative distinction from which they are free. So I'm free from these chains, or I'm free to do as I please, whatever, and it gets, the freedom of speech. Okay, who has the freedom of speech? Actually, we talk about these, we talk about rights, for example, constitutional rights or human rights,
yeah,
as if they are absolute, but the truth is that they're always theoretically absolute, right? The freedom
right,
of speech, just because it's written down on a piece of paper, doesn't mean that the freedom of speech is there for everyone,
right. It
right?
doesn't, and in fact, it cannot apply to everyone equally. Like,
Right.
even just because the means of application are so imperfect, right?
Right.
Even if people were interested in applying them equally, they wouldn't be. And furthermore, people are not interested in applying them equally.
Well, yeah, and the sheer dynamics of a society does not allow for equality in any manner. And that's why it's always a lie, at least in terms of, or it's always hypothetical and theoretical. It's never actualized.
Right.
Um, because the constraints, of which there are near infinite opportunities for potential constraints depending on the subjective being and their whatever the multitudes of structures by which they are bound by. Um,
Yeah.
uh, you know, the point is just that it's the variety is near infinite, and thus already we very clearly, if and I say this repetitively to people all the time when discussing the free will topic, is like if you have even the faintest of perspective on on the human condition and the potential for the human condition and what is going on within each subjective being's personal reality, if
Hmm.
you have even the faintest perspective and honesty, in my opinion, then then you know there's no such thing as equal opportunity or equality or freedom. Like these, because a lot of people approach the free will conversation, especially people who tend to really be fixated on the free will sentiment.
Hmm.
Um, and the need to have it, they do so in this way that like blankets the world, and like really they blanket the world as if like I'm perpetually I've used that word a lot. It's a good word, but it I'm astounded over and over and over again by what, from my perspective, is complete lack of awareness on these people's
Hmm.
parts towards others and others' lack of freedoms.
Right. Well, and I mean, what simpler way to sum up privilege than that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's why I'm always using this turn of phrase. I say persuasion by privilege, persuasion by privilege, persuasion by privilege, because that's the repeated reality of all these people's perspectives. They talk about the world as if it's just, well, all you have to do is like, get do whatever the hell you want to,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
it's like, are you really that limited in perspective that you cannot see that that is not the truth for so many beings?
Well, it's
And the
just like it's so obvious. I mean, this is one that just again, it just kind of burns my ass. Like, if you want to get a job, then
Yeah,
you'll probably be able to get a job. If you don't want to get a job, like the gulf from going from not wanting a job to wanting a job is so much wider than the gulf between wanting a job and not having a job and having a job, right?
or just straight up. I mean, and I'll always throw it back. Capacity. What
Yeah,
capacity do you have to get a
yeah.
job?
I mean, to say nothing of like even irrespective. I mean, everyone focuses on capacity, right? But it's like your own ability to become motivated is part of capacity,
Yeah, that's a part of it. Absolutely.
right? Like it's like yes, there like many people don't wind up homeless because they have a system of responses in their body that makes the
Well, they have
possibility of homelessness
well, they have
uh
the means. They have the means
in
to do something about it. And
well
whereas
n
that's
yes, and I'm
that's not
saying
an
that even the desire to like the like someone who loves uh running a business and buying and selling real estate, if someone loves doing that, they that in it in them, like regardless of how good they are at it, just the love of doing it, the love of doing something that earns you money is like a massive privilege, right?
I mean, there are so many layers of privilege in that already. Yeah.
Right.
There's so many. Yeah.
And so I mean, it's like it's one of the things where that like people are like the idea that, I mean, again, it's like, and I speak as someone who had like I have a lot of capacities in terms of technical stuff.
Mm.
What I don't have capacity for is doing the things that would make me rich because I find most of those things to be disgusting. And like
Yeah.
I
You have no
can't do
interest.
anything about that, right? That's
Mm.
not something that's not something to like power through.
Mm.
And if someone didn't have that, then they would be able to go for it and like more power to them, right? Um, I don't know. I'm a little bit.
Yeah.
I've lost the thread a little bit. I'm sorry.
Well, no, no, you're on it. You're on it. But I see you delving into like your personal experience and trying to relate to that, and I can understand that. Um, but the point is like, to speak on that is like there are so many layers to this capacity cake or this privilege cake um,
Well,
that
and
can be
I
that
guess
can
this
be
is my
considered.
question. Yeah, sorry. Go on. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because it's you can pick it apart kind of forever,
Hmm.
um, in the sense that there's always a new layer to consider in terms
Hmm.
of what might limit someone in comparison to someone else, and what might liberate one person in comparison to someone else. And
Hmm.
and So to blanket the world in this ubiquitous sort of sentimentality of blind presumption of equal opportunity or free will for all is just outrightly completely dishonest and persuasion by
Yeah.
privilege. And that's why I say it over and over and over again, because that's
Yeah.
all it is. It's a persuasion of privilege of thinking, well, I'm free to do this, so that means everyone's free to do it, right? Like, I mean, it's really that dumb, and that there's no better way for me to say it. It's that basic.
Yeah,
People
it's
are
really
failing to
stupid.
people are failing to see out of them outside of themselves so much that their perspective could not be any more false and any more subjective. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all about them, and then they assume the whole world from there.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I personally, I mean, so okay, here's another thing that I'm curious about, right? Like I personally have not like it seems to me that free will also may be, or what's generally called free will is also just totally an illusion.
Yeah, well,
Um, like
I,
in many of my explorations, like I have never really I've come across the illusion of choice
I
many
guess
times.
I just real quick, I usually don't say it in that way because that sort of turn of phrase is very built into the rhetoric behind all this stuff. And people are
Yeah,
so like they play this ping pong game and
and there's a lot of it's kind of in vogue right now to talk for scientists to talk about not believing
mm,
in free will and to show like brain scans to prove that the circuit that makes the decision is before the circuit that proceed
I
that
just
process or
yeah, and
whatever. And I feel like
that
that's kind of a
stuff
waste
is
of time.
well, it's just so much more self-apparent than that, in my opinion.
Right. Exactly. Like I
It's
don't need
so
a
much
brain.
more
I did not come to
fundamental.
this from because I saw a brain scan and got convinced of it by the evidence. Right. Like
Yeah.
I'm just talking about like try to look at your finger, move your finger, and try to discriminate the moment when you actually made the choice to do so. You can't do
Mm.
it.
Yeah, no.
So, like, why do you think that you have the choice? You know, like
Yeah. And a lot of
and again, that's something that I am not. I have not uh, witnessed that in a way that I could not be convinced otherwise. Like my that is still kind of in the realm of belief for me because like that seems to be consistent what I've got. Like there are things that I know through revelation, and there are things that I believe. And I would say that this lack of free will is in me at least is still in the realm of belief because I've not seen a counterexample.
yeah.
Um, so I'm willing to be, you know, I'm not viewing it as some kind of like final knowledge personally. Um, and yet
Well,
everything that I've experienced when I've looked into it deeply in various states of consciousness, I've come to the conclusion again and again that there's kind of nothing there. And I'm interested in how that well, one, I'm interested in your experience of that and if that is also your experience. And then subsequently, I'm interested in how that experience relates to this larger question of what we're calling free will and what people think about as free will.
so as far as I can tell,
I also want to be sensitive. I know we've been talking for a long time. I want you to feel like you have permission to
mm,
stop whenever you need to. I don't know if this is like hard on your system to speak
I
this
mean,
way or whatever.
I mean, everything is, but so yeah, but I appreciate that. Yeah, and perhaps
Um,
if we do end up discussing again, we can get into some further stuff regarding even my circumstances and stuff like that.
Absolutely, yeah. I would definitely like to speak more about that. Yeah, and just like what's going on, like what your experience of life is, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
That's also very interesting to me. Um,
it would be worthwhile, perhaps.
yeah.
But let's yeah, we'll keep going for this with this for now and see what happens. But I guess the phenomenon that I recognize is that people who exist in conditions of relative freedom
Mm,
overlay that sense of inherent freedom that they may experience with what they're calling their will.
hmm. Yeah, yeah,
So, so you have people who exist in conditions of relative freedom, which we've already established are not everyone,
right. This is very
obviously.
clear, and I'm very
Very,
obvious. And
very,
the fact that people disagree with you online when you make that claim, I just find completely astounding.
yeah, and you wouldn't, it's like countless people.
Yeah,
I mean, countless people who disagree with me, yeah, or play in some game of whatever.
yeah,
Um, so we've established that there's
yeah.
many people who lack freedoms altogether of all varieties.
Right,
So these are people who exist in some condition of inherent or relative
right.
privilege and freedom, who
Hmm.
then overlay that condition of relative privilege and freedom with what's called the will. And we can and the definition of will is, I mean, what is it? The will is the call to action, maybe the
I
call
think
to
you've said it's capacity for choice, I think.
the capacity for choice. Yeah. I mean, to be fundamental about it, because we have to be a little bit fundamental about it, when we're going into this
Absolutely.
language. Otherwise, you're
Absolutely.
you're you're perpetually in a again perpetually in a game of playing some semantic word, a semantic word game of,
Hmm.
oh no, it means this, it means this, it means this, whatever. But so capacity for choice, which again, and that's something we could break down in and of itself. There are many who lack capacity for choice altogether, let alone free choice,
Right,
right?
right.
So
Yeah. Well,
so
and this also gets into my sort of like, because again, it's like maybe all we have is illusion of choice, and that choice and everything is just an unfoldment,
yeah, and I guess
original and
the reason I don't use the word like illusion and stuff is because then it gets even more ambiguous when discussing this stuff. And it
right.
can go into like realms of like, well, what is an illusion and why is it more or
Yeah.
less real? And what
And it
is
all and it also tends to go into, I mean, again, it's like in the same way because like people are people who live in privilege are not resilient, right? Like it's one of the prices that you pay of living in privilege is a lack of resilience. And so like when the things that you're used to get taken away from you, you sort of
Mhm.
wilt, right?
Well,
And
yeah,
you're just
it's a threat. I don't know if I was discussing this with you earlier, but I was discussing with someone earlier today that, you know, these if if these constructs within their world are broken down, it is a quite literally a threat to everything they assume themselves to be, their
yeah,
reality to be, all
yeah.
reality to be, what they um everything. And thus it's a threat to them even potentially biologically. And so the instinct survival is kicking in. You're literally to break apart the foundation, this fabricated pedestal of perception that they've built, is to threaten their lives, at least from their perspective.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you were saying that you texted that to me or something like that
Yeah.
earlier. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and it also and one of the outcomes of that lack of resiliency is that the whole conversation often will sort of collapse into this kind of nihilism of like, well, if there is no choice, then everything is pointless, and uh, whatever, we might as well just kill ourselves or whatever. And it's like it's not even like, well, yeah, from another perspective, everything is pointless, but it's actually not a problem, right? It's the kind
Right.
of
Well, that but that gets
self-defeating,
into, yeah.
lazy nihilism,
But you
right?
see, but the from where I'm at, it's like that's just people dealing with their internal polarity that they have yet to see through. Um, they're
Mm.
wavering back and forth between, oh, if it's this way, then I have to feel this. If it's this way, then I have to feel this. Or
Mm.
and
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do. I
and
see.
and and so when people are um when people are convinced of their character, which is most everyone, um and when I say this convinced of their character, what I mean is that someone is not seeing through what it is that they are and why it is that they're doing it, and
Hmm.
so there's this um simple lack of awareness of what it is they truly are and what is actually being experienced and what is happening, and witnessing it as it is happening, and instead they're in the world of the character
Hmm.
of of whatever I call it, play pretend, the land of make believe, of
Right. Even
of
if the character is a character that's perceiving truth, right?
right, right,
It's like
because
you're not
these, like I
perceiving
said,
truth, you're playing a character that's perceiving truth.
right, and like I said earlier, we all play characters for better or worse, and the system necessitates such. The whole
Right.
meta system necessitates such. Like I said, even Christ and Krishna were playing a character,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no escaping that. No, there's not. But there
Yeah.
can be an awareness of it,
Hmm.
and and um very, very few come to such an awareness. Very, very, very few, because their whole world is rooted in what they what they need to believe to be true, as opposed to the truth. Um,
And maybe more to the point, like the capacity is just not
and
there, and that's just
and the
what is.
capacity, and we go yes, and we go back to capacity, yes, and we go
Yeah.
back to inherentism and nature, and yes, and these things being the motivation for all things, because even, and this is the best part and I mean this kind of ironically, because
Mm.
it's, for me, there's not necessarily a best part. It's just the parts that are so abundantly true from my position, is that even if one fails in terms of awareness, guess what they're doing the entire time? They're still playing the fucking character, even if they want to or not. so
Right.
so it
Yeah.
does, the system isn't stopping. Time is still moving forward linearly from the terms of the subjective, the perspective of the subjective person. So there's no stopping it. You can't just say, even if, when you're wrapped up in it, and if you think you're not wrapped up in it, or maybe I'll say it this way, whether you are or aren't wrapped up in it, you're still in it.
Hmm.
You are still that which you are in that moment, for whatever reasons that you are.
Yeah.
And it's funny to me because, like, from, I and it's funny and horrible. Anytime I say that, if I say something's funny, it kind of means both simultaneously.
Yeah, sure.
it,
That's
it's it's
understandable.
it's sort of funny and extremely horrible and horrifying, and outrightly absurd. I think maybe absurd is actually the better word usually, but um, you know, I watch people like I'm watching a movie almost, and that's horrible for me, because it's not dehumanizing. It's just depersonalizing. It's that when I see people doing what they're doing, I see them doing only as they can and must. And 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 the irony is, I mean, the added irony is, like, plenty of people are quite free in such a condition. And they are.
Mm.
And they
Hmm.
and they and they are, and they don't have to know that they're not. And
Mm,
and they don't have to know of other people who are absolutely not.
right. Right. Yeah.
Because their perspective of privilege perpetually persuades them, and it does so over and over and over again. And